Hello fellow techies, you're here with me, Christina at Kit Guru, to look at the K55 RGB Pro XT keyboard from Corsair. As you may have noticed, they have had some new releases recently, and this is one of them. This board comes in at $74.99, so let's dive in to see what the K55 RGB Pro XT has to offer. So it's that time again where I ask you to subscribe because it helps us massively. Also make sure you hit that thumbs up because it makes me happy. See? So first impressions out of the box is that this feels like a budget keyboard, and the aesthetics of it also fit that description too. There is a lot of plastic here, albeit that there is some glossy plastic along the top and the body is a stippled effect plastic, so there is some sort of variation in texture. The keys are ABS, which is nice when they are fresh, but when they degrade, and quite quickly so over time, they can get quite shiny. It is good though to see that there are some media keys along the top. These are again plastic and a little spongy feeling, but I don't think this is overly important as they are just media keys. There are also 3 keys next to these, and from left to right are macro recording key, brightness, Windows lock. Underneath we have the same stippled effect that runs across the whole board, and then you have the flip out feet. There sadly isn't any rubber on the base of these feet themselves, and to be honest the non-slip pads are pretty small, and you can see that it does move around on the desk a lot more than my own keyboard, the Razer Quartz Huntsman for instance. Talking of my keyboard, in comparison to the K55 it's kind of dwarfed. The K55 Pro XT is 481 by 167 by 36mm in total. It's pretty big, but it's surprisingly not overall very heavy at 0.94 kilograms, which is again surprising, but this could be down to the amount of plastic that is used. The cable is a rubber coated cable, and this is great for preventing catching on the desk, but it also is a nightmare for kinking, and the kinks never really seem to come out. There's always some sort of shape left behind even after pulling them out. The cable ends in a USB-A, and as you can see the cable is non-detachable. Moving on to the detachable wrist rest, even though it does have a rubber finish, it still kind of feels very plasticky, and to be honest it isn't very comfortable. It's better for height and angle, but that's really about it. It's pretty hard. I would say that having my hands on the mat underneath my board is more comfortable than the wrist rest, but that's just my preference. The wrist rest is also pretty flexible in build quality, and the keyboard itself also has quite a significant amount of flex too. The one thing that is really nice about this keyboard though is the perky RGB. It's really bright and vibrant. You can see an almost seamless light underneath the keys, and the front shows those lovely colours through even in broad daylight. So overall the aesthetic is pretty much very plasticky, and unfortunately it does feel a little bit budget, which with a price of $74.99 it might be redeemable if the specs and features add up. So let's carry on and look at some features. The first feature I would like to touch on is there is an IP rating, and it is IP42, which is, as Corsair claims, dust and spill resistant. However, this is a very limited protection, and it only protects against objects that are 1mm or bigger and water spray less than 15 degrees from vertical. So a spill from a glass is not really that protected depending on how much you drop on it. I guess it's better than nothing, but you'd really need an IP54 or 55 rating to be properly water and dust resistant. We expect most items to have anti-ghosting and N-key rollover as a minimum nowadays, I think, but the K55 has anti-ghosting and selective 12-key rollover. So instead of the full N-key rollover, Corsair say this still means that FPS and MOBA game inputs are always registered, even with simultaneous presses, so I thought I would test this out using a key test software to see how many key presses are simultaneously registered and on what keys this applies to. This was extremely hard to articulate, trying to press 12 buttons at once, but with some finger twister and help from someone else, I did manage to do it. And here you can see that all these buttons can be pressed at the same time, no issues whatsoever. However, if you have Q, W, E, R and T, F pressed and try to press other buttons, some register and some do not. I was trying to press the P, O and I and U here too, but only C, H, B, N, M, etc. showed up. I suppose whether you notice this versus N-key rollover is really going to depend on your playstyle and what keys you frequently press simultaneously. Okay, next, the switches are rubber dome membrane keys, and I can feel a load of you turning off right now because this is like, you know, okay, you might not like it, but let's give it a chance here. The rubber domes have quite a noticeable tactile bump, and they are super silent, so perfect for those up till silly o'clock playing video games, for instance. Me included. I did feel that the keys are slightly wider spaced or maybe have slightly different placement. I did find I was mistyping initially and I couldn't just jump straight on and touch type. Another feature of the keyboard is those G keys that are along the side of the board, or macro keys maybe you could call them. And although you have the FN key combinations, you also have these buttons that you can set up through iCue software, or you can use them as streaming commands through the Elgato Streamdeck software. So this is a little perk, especially if you're trying to save money for other streaming equipment. You may not have to buy a separate Streamdeck. But that takes me on to the fact that this keyboard can run in hardware mode or in software mode, meaning it can run with and without software. You can control lighting effects and also record macros directly onto the onboard memory. To record a macro, you hold the M key and press the keys to record. Press the M key again and press G1 to G6, depending on what key you want to save it to, or you can hold the M key to cancel. You can also clear a recording by holding M, then pressing M again, and the G1 to G6 key to clear that key. This leads me nicely on to software. So make sure you have the most up-to-date software, of course, and here you can see the key assignment tab, and this is where you can assign whatever action you want to each individual button. Next, we have lighting effects, which you can change if you click the plus button. This is for when the software is active. If you click the hardware lighting tab, you can assign the effects for when no software is active or if it's unavailable for whatever reason. Performance tab lets you disable keys for when the Windows lock is on. And lastly is device settings. Here you can check for updates, change RGB brightness, language and polling rate. If you install iCue and Streamdeck software from Elgato, in the top left of the Streamdeck software, it should say Corsair G keys. If not, click the drop down and here you can select the G keys. On the left hand side, there is a little pop-out window that shows your settings, and you can disable this if you wish by clicking the X. In the main window, you will see the 6 G keys available. On the right is everything you can control via these G keys, including the Elgato game capture if you have an Elgato capture card, OBS Studio, etc. For example, we will control our PC, which you access via system by dragging one of the actions to the key that you want. For instance, a website, you can type a URL and title for easy access. Here you can see the other actions that you can assign by clicking the more actions, and here you can search and download other applications to control too. After all that information, let's talk about gaming. So gaming wise, I found the bump of these rubber domes a little bit drastic, and it did make me sometimes miss a beat. I wasn't pressing it really hard enough to engage it sometimes as well, so especially under pressure, I was missing keys. It's okay for typing, but I would say not so much for gaming in my opinion. You might get used to it though over time, but my time with the K55 RGB Pro XT, I didn't really gel with it. There was some positives though, so no lag or anything negative like that, so nothing really to complain about as such, but as I mentioned, I did feel that I was kind of disorientated with the key placement for some reason, and those bumps are a little bit intense for me. I thought I would do a quick comparison finally before I do a roundup to the K60 RGB Pro by Corsair. When looking at the K60 Pro, you can see that there is much more rigidity here because of the aluminium plate, and obviously the keys on the K60 Pro are cherry viola mechanical switches, so in my opinion they sound and feel a lot better. Here is a sound test for you with them both. The only thing that the K60 Pro doesn't have is those G keys and the dedicated media keys, but you do get full N key rollover and 100% anti-ghosting. Also, the K60 RGB Pro is about only £10 more on Amazon at the moment at the time of this review at $84.98. In conclusion, I would say that the K55 RGB Pro XT keyboard is a bit of a letdown for me personally. The keys being membrane have a very specific feel to them, and I think you either love them or you hate them. I'm not personally a fan, other than the fact that they're really quiet. That's quite cool. The keyboard is also pretty chunky and the build quality isn't amazing. The key thing really is at £75, there are plenty of quality mechanical keyboards around at the same price, as we mentioned earlier with the K60 RGB Pro. But also things like the Logitech G4 are even cheaper than this board, with plenty of other options from the likes of Keychron, Orkey and Drevo, if you want a budget mechanical keyboard, that is. So let us know down in the comments what you think of the K55 RGB Pro XT keyboard by Corsair. Will you be buying it? Also, please make sure that you check out our merch down below and hit those special buttons that make me and us so happy. The subscribe and like buttons, they're just there. All the best from me, Christina, and see you here on Kit Guru next time.